Okay, so today we're gonna be working on the Mustang today, and I have some mixed feelings making this video just because we're not gonna be installing anything, rather we're going to be removing this supercharger off the car. Now, this is the Procharger P1SC high output kit, meaning that this is a shared drive system and not on a separate pulley like their stage 2 kits are. And why am I doing this? I guess I've just been toying around with the idea of possibly selling the car in the last few months or so, and this is the first big aftermarket component that is probably relatively easy to sell. So, this is a sad moment, but I figure I'll make this one last series of videos showing you guys showing you guys how everything comes together, how it comes apart. So even for those who are interested in potentially getting this kit, it will be helpful to you to show you how it all comes together. Just looking at this right now, I'm having second thoughts about doing it, but I think in the end this is for the best. I guess before we get started, I think I'm going to just fire this up one last time just to hear the setup, and then we'll get right to it. So here's how I'm kind of thinking about breaking this down. So first, obviously, I'm going to get the car up in the air. I'm going to take the belly pan off, and then I'm going to take the front bumper off. Pull all the charge piping, the intake, the catch can system, PCV system, and then the blower itself. And then I would have to drain the coolant so I could reinstall or remove the Procharger specific thermostat housing. And then finally the Procharger coolant reservoir. And lastly, I'll remove the injectors and the booster pump that I have in the car. So I guess we'll start from the beginning then, and I'm going to start by raising the car up on jack stands. You don't have to really raise it too high. Basically, the only reason you're going to be under the car is to take the belly pan off for access. So I'm just going to go, as minimally on the lowest stand, on the lowest setting on the jack, and leave it like that, and that'll be fine. And one note about lifting this car, the only approved jack points that Ford tells you to use are the reinforced areas of the pinch wells at the front and at the rear of the car. Technically, you are not allowed to lift the car from the front K member or the rear diff. I've seen people do it, but it's up to you if you're willing to do that. For me, I just got a set of jacking rails. I think they're Steeda jacking rails, which just makes it really easy to lift the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. first things first, we're gonna be taking this undertray or belly pan, whatever you want to call it, off. So this is just secured by a bunch of you can see one here, 3 over there, just a bunch of 7mm screws. So just find them all and you know, unscrew them. And then it should just unclip. There's also a couple of push pins here like that, so just, you know, there's nothing really hidden about this piece. Just get all the screws and the tabs out and it'll come right off. Oh, also worth mentioning that this is also attached to the fender liners or wheel liners with push pins, so don't forget about those as well. So, and next, I'm going to be removing the radiator cover. So, those are just held on by some push pins here. Just undo all those and it'll come right off. I use one of these. This has been really useful. This is just a Harbor Freight push pin remover. How this works is you just find the recess areas of the push pin, squeeze it, and it comes right out. Easy. Would recommend. So, go ahead and get all those off. With that removed, there are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 screws that are holding the bumper still onto the car, or at the front of the car at least anyway. There are these 7mm, and hidden here, don't forget about these, are 2, 1 on each side, 5.5mm screws that you have to undo. So go ahead and do that next. I lied. These look like they're 8mm. Next, you're going to be removing, there's 2 screws that are left holding the bumper on. There's one about here, and there's one on the other side as well. In order to do that though, you do have to peel back the wheel liner, meaning that you're going to have to take the wheels off. So I'm going to do that now. And there's a couple more push pins that are holding the liner on. And now I'll do the same on the other side. Cool. Huh. One word of advice, so this seems to be a common problem on the Mustangs. So if you see here on the bumper tab, you know, this one's already, I've already repaired that at some point. And the reason is when you pull on this, there's just a lot of people forget that there's a bolt here. And also when you like to pull on it from the outside, especially when it's cold, it likes to snap off. What I recommend is get behind this piece with like a flathead and then push it out on the tab itself, and then you won't break them as you're pulling the bumper. But if you do break it, it's not a big deal. There's a lot of methods to correct this. I've just zip tied the bumper back on, and a lot of people use quick latches or whatever else, but it all works. No big worries if you do. One last step before you pull the bumper off though is you're going to want to disconnect electrically the fog lamps and what are these called? Running lights? I don't know. But they're just harnesses underneath the car. They should be pretty obvious to spot. I'll show you on this side. There's one here. Just push in and do these. Two. It's hard to do this with one hand. Okay, and three. And do the same on the other side. Now pull the bumper off carefully and put it in a place where it's not going to get hurt or scratched up. So there's still there's some locating dowels on the front bumper, so it'll lift off of that. So how this basically works is the air intake is here. It draws air from under the bumper at the bottom of the car up through the compressor right here. And then if you look down here, there's a 90-degree elbow. You can't see that. There's a 90-degree elbow. Okay. That goes to the bypass valve, to the front of the car, into the intercooler, through and out, and this is where the MAP sensor is relocated to. And the outlet goes to the through the other side of the bumper and up and around into the throttle body. So the reason why Procharger supplies this is I think the stock OEM coolant reservoir is kind of too bulky and it will interfere with this pipe right here, which is why they give you this nice little aluminum piece. So I think what I'm going to do next is undo the charge piping, remove the intercooler, and see if I could get the actual head unit and all of its tensioners, pulleys, the pulley system, everything off. And then we'll gauge if I want to go any farther today from there. One more thing I wanted to address is the bypass valve operation. So typically this is a spring-loaded valve that right now you can see, maybe you can't see, but it's closed, okay? And when your car is running and you have high vacuum, like in idle or in deceleration, you can see there's a vacuum reference line that goes all the way around into the block right there. It pulls or it overcomes the spring force, so it opens this valve. Now what that does is, under light load and under decel, under vacuum, this is venting the air that is coming from the supercharger, because remember, this is belt driven, so you are always going to be making flowing air through the compressor whether or not the engine uses it or not. And if the engine doesn't need it, then it has to vent somewhere, which is why this exists. And when you get on the throttle, what it does is, whenever this vacuum gets to a certain point where the spring is able to close, then it shuts the valve and it sends all the compressed air through the system and into the throttle body. And another thing that it does is, if you have enough boost, and once you're in actual boost, this also helps this keep this valve shut, so you have even less of a likely chance of leaking air through the system. And the mass airflow sensor, which is right there, needed to be relocated because because the MAF needs to be after the bypass valve, otherwise it would lose metered air going into the system and therefore not run properly on a MAF based system. So Procharger supplies this little extension harness which plugs into the MAF over there, and you just plug it in, zip tie it down, and you're good to go. So where was I? Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this. I'm not going to drain the coolant yet, but I'm going to just undo this so I have better access to this, and start undoing all the charge piping, and also just to remove this vacuum line too. That's the first piece of it right there, air inlet. And I'm going to tighten this back up, so. Okay, and before moving on, I wanted to kind of go over how the catch can setup works on this car. So, catch can, if you don't know, basically what it does is it intercepts the crankcase vent that comes out of the PCV. It filters it, it catches the oil that's in the air, condenses it, collects it here, and then feeds the clean air back into the air inlet for burning. Now this is a UPR Procharger specific catch can, and how it's routed on this car, because I've seen some people ask the same questions online, is this is the check valve side. Okay, this comes along all the way to the front of the car and tees right here. Okay, this is the non-check valve side, and this also comes along and gets teed here. Okay, and this tee goes into the inlet of the UPR catch can, and this, and you know, the air comes in here, the oil condenses, gets left in the catch can, and this is the outlet, and the outlet, is this right here, which then goes into the compressor to and then gets compressed and goes through the intercooler, etc., etc. I've never really had any issues with excessive blow-by on this car. I think the engine in this car is still pretty healthy. The only time I did collect more than normal amount, and by normal I mean like a spoonful or two every oil change, is one, when the dealer overfilled the oil, which after that I stopped going to the dealer for oil changes. And second, when it just got hot at the track, and you know these cars don't have an oil cooler for the factory, and that just resulted in excessive oil vapors getting pushed through the system. During autocross, regular driving, daily driving, I've really never had this collect more than a spoonful or two every couple thousand miles. So anyway, okay, let's continue then. With the air inlet off, what I'm going to do next is, and this is a better view of the bypass pipe routing. So this is compressed air now. I'm going to undo this hose clamp right here. Undo this, and I should be able to pull this out like that. So I'll do that next. And for reference, before I cut it, I'll show you. This vacuum line is just any vacuum reference. In this case, it goes all the way around into this manifold here. This goes to the boost gauge, and this is just manifold vacuum. I'm just gonna cut it because it's just a parts store, 5/16 and you should be able to find it anywhere. What is that? See, okay. Oh, okay. So this is probably the most difficult piece to install, and this goes from the bypass valve pipe into the Procharger outlet, and it just sits against the frame rail. This is fairly malleable, so don't be afraid to kind of yank on it, but take your time with it. What I found works is if I apply or if I just hold the bypass valve here and push this pipe this way towards the firewall, then just wiggle it enough times and it'll come out. And these are just held on by hose clamps. Oh, okay. See if this will come out. That's the entirety of the hot side on this car. Pretty smooth so far. Just tying this back up. Yeah, and you can see how the resting position of the bypass valve is closed unless I maybe... No, I can't pull it enough to open it. I tried. Okay. Alright, so with the cold side fully removed, what I'm going to do now, or I'm sorry, hot side, what I'm going to do now is take out the cold side of the piping. So in order to do that, there's a few clamps right here. I'm going to have to unbolt this. Again, I'm not going to drain the coolant, but I'm just going to let this be flexible so I could pull this off. And it should only be a matter of just all these clamps and it'll come right off, I hope. Let's give it a shot.
Radiator. All right. Okay, so here's where we're at so far. So we have all the charge piping off the car now. We have two sections, and I've written this down, so whoever's installing this next could figure it out. Cold side, cold side. This is post intercooler, and hot, hot, hot. Hot side meaning pre intercooler. Okay, so pretty straightforward setup. Now what I'm gonna do next is uninstall the intercooler. So I'm going to unplug this map sensor, and there's a bracket here that bolts the intercooler to the car, so I'll unbolt this bracket and it should just drop right off. Okay. And these are, I believe they're half inch. They're American. Nope. Maybe 13s? $14s they are. I'll break them loose, and then I'll finish removing them by hand, and then I'll drop the intercooler. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So at this step, just be careful, because this is really close to the condenser, that you don't accidentally smack it, because then you might just cause yourself an AC leak. Just take it slowly. It'll all come out, hopefully. Oh, there's also two bolts on the other side that hold the intercooler on. But I think I'm going to remove all the 14s first. Either way. Now the bolts that I was talking about are here, here, maybe, yeah, right there, you can see now. And there's one right below that. There's two on each side. So undo those and the intercooler should drop right out. What size are those? Those are probably 13s. Deep. Yeah, 13s. I'm gonna use a ratcheting wrench for that one. Going the right way would help. Now, after I undo this and I remove this bracket, now this bracket's gonna be held in place because this is studded. The intercooler is just gonna fall, so just be wary of that and be ready to catch it if that does happen. So I'm gonna undo this nut. Right. Now I'm going to support the intercooler, remove the bracket. Which okay, let's carefully lower the intercooler. Now what I'm gonna do is undo this harness right here. This is the map extensions. It's just zip tied along this other harness here, and it's just going to go all the way around where it used to be, which I believe is right here. Okay. And I mean, when I have the air box, I won't need the extension anymore, and the sensor would just go there. So I'm just going to cut these off and remove the harness. Next, what I'm going to do is undo the serpentine belt. So this right here, where my finger is, not that, this one is the tensioner. Don't try and undo this. This will come loose and you'll have to retighten it. So get a 15 mil and a breaker bar. Turn this counterclockwise, and that'll relieve the tension. And easiest I found is you just undo the pulley from here and work the belt out the rest of the way. And it's easier if you use a 12 point here just because you have more of a flexibility if you're not using a ratchet. But yeah, just loosen that. Okay. Actually, no, I've just done something wrong here. Alright, so when you go and undo the tensioner, give yourself some slack like this, because after you remove the belt and you redo the tensioner, what's gonna happen is this breaker bar is gonna get stuck against the coolant hose, and you'll have a tough time putting that back off. So if you just start it right here, then you remove the belt, and when the tensioner returns to its natural position, you can just pull the breaker bar back out. And I won't need that again, so I'm going to put that. And after you undo the belt from the tensioner pulley, just work your way around it, and it should come right off. And in case you're wondering, the part number on this, if I can still see it, is this right here. This will work with the 3.5 inch pulley, K061066. And this is a gauge belt. Alright, so at this point there's not a lot left. So what's left? So this right here, what I'm pointing to, is the Procharger tensioner, okay? And this is just the main bracket. So that's held on by 4 bolts. This is also held on by 4 bolts. And it should be completely uninstalled. Yeah. How about that? Alright, let's finish it up. Okay, so again, the tensioner is down here. And these are gonna be 13s, and there's one up top, one on the side, and one on the bottom, so 3 bolts. Okay, and you're gonna need a pretty thin wall socket to get these. My Impact 3/8 sockets wouldn't fit these, but this 12-point will. So just go ahead and undo those and unbolt the tensioner. Now I think these spacers that go on the tensioner are specific length, but I'll figure it out later. So anyway, there. See how long that is? Right, there's one. Whoa. Cool. So this is the tensioner out of the car now, and you know, it's fairly obvious which spacer goes with which, so I don't think there's gonna be any issues figuring out which or what goes where. Pulley's still in good shape. This is brand new actually. I replaced this maybe 4 months ago, sometime this year. But anyway, so yeah, I'm going to bag that all up, label it, and then move on to the big part, last piece right there. So this is the last piece of the puzzle. This is the main bracket for the Procharger head unit. This is, as far as I can see, there's only 4 bolts here, 3 13s and 1 17, which this is the 17, and then 17, 13, 13, and 13. And I think that's all I see. So I'm going to undo those and see if it comes out. Maybe it'll get stuck, I don't know. Let's give it a shot. Okay, again I'm going to be breaking all the bolts loose before taking any of them out fully. So and now I see the whole assembly moving, so I think those are all the ones that are holding this together. So I'm going to loosen the 17 all the way out and then take each bolt out one by one and then pull the pull the head unit off after that. So you definitely don't want to drop this, that's for sure. So this pretty short bolt for the 17, and there's no spacer behind it as far as I can tell. Okay, so that's one. I'm going to remove the bottom ones first just because they're tougher to get to. Okay. And this is a really long bolt on the bottom here. So here it is. Goes on like this. Okay. So I'll keep those together. Now there's 2 bolts left. So you can see this is already kind of loose. Please be careful. Again, you don't want to drop this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bolt off, support it with my hand under the Procharger like that. I'm going to grab the, what do you call it, the compressor outlet, and then I'm going to remove the last bolt and carefully lift it out. Okay. As soon as you remove this bolt, the whole assembly may swing, so be wary of that. This is another really long bolt. Now I'm supporting the supercharger with my hand, and I'm going to undo this one. Okay. That's fine, I'll get that later. Alright, what do we have here? We have this piece that goes on the, let me take this all over there. So this pulley goes behind this bolt, okay? This one, aluminum spacer, goes here, and this is a threaded rod-on bolt ends. This actually goes on the alternator stud here on one side, and on the other side goes behind this with another long bolt. And the 17 is just a really stubby 17. So, and that is the main bracket. All these pulleys feel fine. I've replaced them. And the supercharger is now out of the car completely. There's a little bit of pieces here and there, so I still have to remove this coolant reservoir, and this vacuum block I believe is also Procharger, including this whole line. This is the OEM vacuum block, so I'll be pulling that off as well. I need to finish pulling off the catch can system, and then the injectors, last step, and then it'll all be uninstalled. That'll be it. The car will be back to stock. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, fam. It's been wild, but gotta move on to better things.